Imagine two scenarios. Both are EDH games with one brand new player and 3 enfranchised players. The new player is playing some precon that they bought. They don't own any other cards. They're pretty much brand new to the game. They might have had some friends teach them Commander, or they learned the rules via Magic Arena, but this is their first EDH game with random players at their local game store. In scenario 1, Spike plays the card Drannith Magistrate. Then Johnny complains their deck is totally shut down and the game's practically over for them. Timmy exclaims that this card is totally unbeatable, and the rest of the time that Drannith is in play, those two constantly complain about how they can't do anything and the game is over for them. Then a few turns later, a board wipe is cast and the Magistrate goes away. In scenario 2, Spike plays the card Drannith Magistrate. Johnny and Timmy both look at their hands and think about where they can develop their board without the commander in play. They might let the brand new player know that Drannith does stop them from playing their commander, but other cards in hand still mostly work. Then after a few turns, a board wipe gets cast and the Magistrate dies. In each of these scenarios, what do you think is the new player's takeaway about Drannith Magistrate, casual EDH, and Magic players as a whole? Many players like to think of Commander as this game of show and tell, where every turn, everyone gets to play their thing, and this happens for about 10 turns until one thing wins the game. And this is how a lot of players construct their decks. But in practice, this doesn't always work. There are a ton of cards that can slow down, stop, or reset your 10-turn buildup. Various potholes and roadblocks on your EDH journey of whatever win con you had in mind. These roadblocks and how to get over them is what I want to talk about today. But before that though, I want to talk to you about today's sponsor, Cool Stuff Inc. You can use code TTM for 5% off sealed products or singles. Plus, it supports the channel. Thanks to Cool Stuff Inc. for sponsoring the video. Salt is a uniquely EDH-related phenomenon. In other formats, you really don't think about these things, because why would you? We're playing a game and anything within the rules is fair. EDH is a special format though, where we all have this unspoken agreement to not play the strong meta decks. Unless you have the spoken agreement to play the meta decks, in which case you're playing CDH, and that's a ton of fun, not relevant for this video. So everyone has agreed to hinder their deck in some way to play a more laid-back, slower, casual game. And mostly this works. In the average random game, most players have decks that are relatively balanced, and if there is some sort of power dispute, the 3v1 can begin until the threat is neutralized. But there are rare occasions where players do get salty, and it's got me thinking about why. I've seen a tremendous amount of comments saying if you have something in your deck, your list is no longer casual. That can be free counter magic, a singular powerful card, or something just monetarily expensive. Players' definitions of casual can include budget archetypes or countless other factors. Think to yourself, what makes a casual deck? You probably have some rules associated with that, and many players will often get a shock when they run into a deck that doesn't fit the mold. But where do all these rules come from? They're most certainly not official. There is no place that says if you run an expensive free counterspell like Fierce Guardianship, your deck is no longer valid as a casual list. These ideas come from players and the community as a whole. It's a fabricated ideal of what a casual Commander game really is. And this makes sense, as Commander is a player-made format. In casual Commander, there certainly are do's and don'ts. This video is not about how it is okay to play competitive EDH decks against precons and stomp every game. Matching power levels is still very relevant. Just like how in any casual board game experience, I would expect players to be playing to win the game or do something, but I'm not planning on everybody looking up strategies on what is the most optimal way to play to eke out percentage points. But I would never fabricate additional rules. This is commonplace in Commander though. No combos, no fast mana, no counters, and sometimes additions to the ban list. These are often called house rules, and I think many times they're used as a crutch for many playgroups. I've heard of multiple playgroups banning cards like Archfiend of Ifnir, Aura Shards, things that can slow you down until dealt with. If we look at some of the most salty cards on EDH Rec, and skip past the mass land destruction, we can find cards like Null Rod, Grave Pact, and Torpor Orb. These are roadblock cards, a term I made up just now while writing the script. Cards that don't advance a game plan, but instead halt another player's game plan. You won't win because of one of these cards, but you can prevent a loss. But unlike generic removal, these cards are not one-time effects. Before your artifact sacrifice deck can go back to doing its thing, the Null Rod has to be removed. And these cards see a lot more play than traditional mass land destruction type effects, like a Leyline of the Void against an Aristocrats deck. It's a relatively common occurrence. And just like the Drannith example earlier, when people are hostile to these cards, I think it teaches new players that roadblocks are a bad thing. So bad that they should not enter your deck, and you should tell others to do the same. And you should add house rules to ban these roadblocks. But roadblock cards are not a bad thing. Magic is a game where there is a solution to every problem. In the past, I've talked about how if your deck folds to one card, you should probably play some way to beat that card. But I haven't said why those cards actually make the game more dynamic and balanced. Imagine if nobody could prevent anybody from doing anything. No roadblocks, no removal. Then whoever draws their win con first just wins. Without the ability to play roadblocks, the fastest deck will always win. Which means to beat you, I have to make a faster deck than you. And if you're not allowed to slow me down, then once my deck gets faster, your only option is to make yours even faster than mine, and so on and so forth. And even if we agree to not update our decks and keep them at the same speed, without roadblocks preventing players from doing things, you would need to add additional house rules, like to stop combos, because that also disrupts the 10-turn buildup. And then once everyone has their deck at the same speed, and they're only using combat damage to win, the game just boils down to whoever draws the big combat damage effect first wins the game, which honestly just makes the game pure luck at that point. If everyone's playing the same speed and the same type of deck, the games are going to feel very samey and very luck-based. Additionally, roadblock cards are great ways for a player that can't keep up with a fast deck. If someone at your playgroup is going crazy with a tuned Joda list, it's a lot easier to just play a few Pillar Fort effects rather than retool your entire list to be faster and stronger than their deck. I know what you might be thinking, what about player agency? Don't these cards rob someone of being able to do game actions? And to some extent, yeah, it does. If you want a game of solitaire show and tell, then yeah, roadblock cards might seem counterintuitive. But if your deck is the fastest and strongest at the table, players might need these to keep up, otherwise they're just going to get crushed. Or alternatively, if you're not the fastest, strongest deck at the table, then it doesn't matter how much agency you have, or if you got to cast all of your spells. Yes, you might not be able to attack because of a Magus of the Moat, but neither is the Maelstrom Wanderer player with 400 power on board. Your mere mortal player agency is nothing compared to a Turbo Teamer god. So if everybody has no limitations and can cast everything all the time, then the rampiest, biggest deck is just gonna beat you. So a roadblock might actually help your deck catch up. But all of this starts with teaching new players to get past these roadblocks. If you tell a player that Drannith Magistrate is unbeatable and ruins the game for everyone, they might believe you, when in fact, beyond normal removal, you could have a deck that uses the commander as a late game finisher, or a deck with a 1-drop commander that almost always gets out earlier than the Drannith, or maybe a deck which uses the commander for synergy but can function without it, or the fact that Drannith is one-sided, meaning a theft effect could really turn the tables. Learning how to get over, under, around, or break through a roadblock is an important skill, and as enfranchised players, it's our duty to pass this skill on to the next generation of players. Content creators, for sure, share the lion's share of the blame here. I always cringe a bit when a creator calls a card unfun. Personally, I've called cards boring, uninteresting, or leading to bad gameplay patterns, but I think it's important to critique a commander or card in an opinionated way. Go Shintai creates decks that are very homogeneous due to the nature of the card, and I find that facet of the commander uninteresting because many of the decks are very samey, so your list will probably look like someone else's. But I would never call the deck unfun or tell someone not to bring it to the table. Fun is far too subjective for me to tell others what is and isn't fun. As long as the deck's power levels are somewhat matched, you should do whatever is most fun for you. Even with this video, I don't want to tell you roadblocks are fun, just that they make the journey to the end of the game more dynamic and can help bring the speed of decks down to the same level, which may or may not be more enjoyable for you and your playgroup. I want you to think about that and maybe give it a try. That said, I am also a funny voice in your Magic Lightbox. If you would rather lose every game but get to attack with your funny bear tokens, rather than miss a few turns of attacking to slow down another deck, that's fine too. I just think we should give new players that choice as well. I want to share 2 stories. If you're a fan of this channel, you might know Humility is my favorite Magic card of all time. It's very cool. You can use it with equipment, counters, tokens, planeswalkers, enchantments, lots of options here. And I remember talking about this on the podcast recently, but I've never had a new player get salty about this card. They're usually interested in the novelty of it, and then attack me with their 1/1s, since my Humility decks probably don't have many creatures. I remember a time specifically where a new player on a precon said, "Ooh, that's cool," and then they destroyed the Humility with a Desert Twister, and then the game moved on, and the player learned of a wacky weird card. That was it. Another story is when I was playing my Grenzo list, and one player got very upset that my deck had fetch lands in it, saying I was lying about the power level of my deck, and I had fast mana in there too. They said there was no possible way this deck was mid-power, and is certainly not casual. Then a new player on a precon asked, why is it weird that I was playing fetches? What's up with my deck? Why are they so upset? And then I told them traditionally fetches are color fixing cards, and using them in a 1-color deck is typically not useful. They're here because I have a Crucible of Worlds and it helps me hit my land drops. Usually most players wouldn't consider this synergy worth the money investment. And then I lost to a different new player on a precon. Salt is a completely player-made, avoidable aspect of the game. It is created by players and fed to new players in this endless cycle of Salt. But we can break this. Teach new players how to beat cards instead of telling them that a player is evil for using it. Show players how to build resilient decks. Teach them how to sandbag. Teach new players about combo cards. Hey, this infinite sack outlet and cards like it oftentimes lead to infinite loops. Be wary of it, hold up mana. Be kind and patient. Give players the benefit of the doubt. This game is hard enough to get into already, and I wonder how many players have been turned off from playing at local game stores with random players or Magic the Gathering as a whole because the general negative attitude some players might have during a game scares them away. I mean, you don't want to get yelled at by the rando, right? If we show players kindness and patience, they'll pass it on, and the game will be better because of it. Okay, I think I'm done talking about Salt in EDH for a little bit. I've done my explorations on it in some recent videos and the podcast and stuff. Probably gonna get back to like brewing or making some weird deck building choices. Thank you very much for watching. I want to give a special thanks to all of my patrons and an extra special thanks to my tier 3 patrons whose names you see here. If you want to support me, liking, subscribing, sharing the video is a great way to do so. But if you really want to support me further than that, check out the Patreon.